There is a pattern in major sporting events that almost never gets the attention it deserves, not until it's too late. The biggest disasters don't announce themselves with fireworks. They don't arrive with a single scandalous headline or one catastrophic press conference. They creep in through feasibility studies, through inflated bid documents, through handshakes in hotel ballrooms that no football fan will ever see. And by the time the world looks up, the damage is already baked into the concrete of stadiums that cost more than small countries, and into schedules that make no sense to anyone except the accountants who signed off on them. The 2026 World Cup gave us a perfect textbook on this. The cracks were visible years before kickoff. The questions were asked repeatedly, and the answers, when they came, were almost always too little, too late. Now look at 2030, 4 years out. And the warning signs are already louder, more specific, and more structurally dangerous than anything we saw in the lead-up to 2026. Not rumors. Not speculation, documents, withdrawn host cities. Open political warfare between co-hosts. Legal proceedings at sport's highest court. And a tournament format so logistically absurd, 6 countries, 3 continents, 44 days, that even FIFA's own internal teams cannot say with confidence how it will actually operate on the ground. So what is really happening here? And why is 2030 shaping up to be not a celebration, but a slow-motion administrative catastrophe? Let's begin with the architecture of what FIFA has built, because you need to understand the scale of the ambition before you can appreciate why the complications are already spiraling. This is the Centenary World Cup, 100 years since Uruguay hosted the first edition in 1930, 13 nations, 3 weeks, a single stadium in Montevideo, a trophy that weighed less than 5 kilograms. To honor that history, FIFA decided to do something genuinely unprecedented and genuinely risky. 3 matches will be played in South America, 1 each in Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay as centenary celebration fixtures. Then the main tournament moves to its primary hosts, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. That means 20 stadiums across 17 cities. A tournament duration of 44 days, the longest in World Cup history, up from 39 in 2026. Why? Because the sheer distance between South America and Europe, combined with the need for rest days and recovery travel, mathematically demands it. 6 countries, 3 continents, 44 days, 100 years of history being honored simultaneously. On paper, it is extraordinary. On paper, in practice, it is a logistical nightmare. And the nightmares are already arriving ahead of schedule. Start with Spain. Because Spain carries the largest number of venues and the heaviest share of the match schedule. 11 stadiums across 9 cities were proposed. But that word, proposed, is doing a lot of heavy lifting, because 2 of those cities have already withdrawn. And the withdrawal process hasn't finished. Malaga was first. In July 2025, the city confirmed it was pulling out, citing logistical issues with the renovation of La Rosaleda Stadium. The plans existed. The investment was discussed. But when the detailed costings came through, the practical reality became clear enough to force a public exit. That alone is not unusual. Infrastructure planning is genuinely complex. Cities sometimes discover during the fine-grain work what they didn't fully understand during the bidding phase. What makes it significant for 2030 is the timing. This decision came years before the tournament, when planning is supposed to be at its simplest. If cities are walking away at this stage, how many more might reach the same conclusion before 2030? That is not a rhetorical question. Then came A Coruña. In March 2026, the mayor and the president of Deportivo de La Coruña made a joint announcement. Withdrawal. Reason: hosting costs. Not vague costs, specific, itemized, unmanageable costs. The Estadio de Riazor needed upgrades to meet FIFA's technical requirements. The plans were real. The funding was not: a historic coastal city, a stadium with its own character, gone from the 2030 map, because the numbers simply didn't add up. The Royal Spanish Football Federation reacted quickly. They submitted replacement bids, Valencia's No Mestalla and Vigo's Balaidos. Here's the detail that matters. Both of those stadiums had already been submitted in earlier bidding rounds and rejected by FIFA. Why? Because their inclusion would have pushed Spain's total beyond the maximum of 20 stadiums for the entire tournament. Now they are being resubmitted as replacements. FIFA will decide, but the fact that the fallback options are venues already reviewed and rejected ones, that adds a layer of procedural instability to a process already managing 2 withdrawals. And then there is San Sebastian. This is where the story gets stranger. In April 2025, residents of the city wrote directly to FIFA, not the city council, not the Football Federation, residents, asking to be removed as a host city. Their concern was over tourism. The worry that World Cup matches would accelerate visitor pressure beyond what the city could absorb. San Sebastian is compact, beautiful, culturally distinct. The idea of it becoming a node in a 44-day global football event generated a reaction that the tourism industry forecasts clearly never anticipated. When residents are writing to football's global governing body before any construction has begun, that is not a minor data point. That is a symptom of something deeper. Now, we arrive at the conflict that reveals the true fracture line in this entire project, the dispute over where the 2030 World Cup final will be played, not because it involves the most money, but because it exposes the tension at the heart of a 6-nation hosting arrangement, where each primary host has different institutional power, different historical relationships with the tournament, and completely different expectations of what hosting should deliver. Spain hosted in 1982, it has the Santiago Bernabeu, recently renovated to a level of technical sophistication that few stadiums anywhere can match. It has Camp Nou, whose history and scale speak for themselves. The president of the Royal Spanish Football Federation stated publicly and deliberately that it would be impossible to explain if Spain were not the host of the final. Those were his exact words. Impossible to explain. Morocco, on the other hand, has never hosted a World Cup. It tried 6 times: 1994, 1998, 2006, 2010, 2026, and only succeeded on the 6th attempt by joining the Spanish-Portuguese bid. The Hassan II Stadium, currently under construction in Casablanca, is projected to hold approximately 115,000 spectators. That would make it the largest football stadium in the world. Morocco wants the final. Morocco has been building towards this for decades. And Morocco's argument is simple: a centenary World Cup hosted across 2 continents, with African football's profile genuinely elevated by the tournament's presence in North Africa, should be capable of hosting its concluding match on African soil. That dispute is genuine, institutional, and completely unresolved. FIFA has said the final venue decision will rest with FIFA, a statement that, notably, acknowledges that neither Spain nor Morocco gets to decide unilaterally. But the gap between what Spain considers obvious and what Morocco considers its right is not a small one. It will need to be bridged through formal process and the public. Statements from Spanish football leadership suggest that process will be anything but smooth. Then, there is the dimension that goes beyond the final venue. Western Sahara, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, has already issued a ruling on this matter. Morocco's football shirts have depicted a map that includes the disputed territory of Western Sahara. The court found that wearing a shirt depicting a map of a disputed area was a breach of regulations, a ruling with direct implications for how Morocco's hosting role intersects with the unresolved status of that territory. This is not a minor footnote. It is a formal legal proceeding at sport's highest judicial level, placed directly inside the framework of a football tournament that FIFA promotes as existing above such disputes. When territorial claims, legal rulings, and hosting obligations collide, that is not a public relations challenge. That is a governance crisis waiting for a trigger. Now step back and look at the full picture. 6 countries, 3 continents, 44 days, no precedent in the sport's history, 2 host cities already withdrawn, with replacement candidates previously rejected, a 3rd city whose residents have formally petitioned to be removed, an open dispute between the 2 largest host nations over the final venue, a legal ruling about map, imagery that intersects directly with one host nation's territorial claims. And if you want to add another layer, the proposed expansion to 64 teams, floated by some FIFA officials, which, had it succeeded, would have pushed tournament scale beyond anything the sport has ever managed. That was not adopted, but the fact it was even discussed tells you something about the mindset inside the organization. The historical comparison that matters most here is 2026 itself. That tournament's planning problems were visible years before the opening match. The warning signs were documented. The questions were asked repeatedly. And the accumulated consequences arrived in the form of canceled fan festivals, hotel occupancy below forecast, legal subpoenas, and controversies that followed the tournament from its opening day. The lesson of 2026 for 2030 is not that multi-nation hosting is impossible. The lesson is that the problems embedded in the planning phase